Hi guys, welcome back to Z's Corner. This is Al. So I've been busy the past few days kind of checking out the new patch. There's other content creators out there that's given their impressions already, so I won't go into too much detail. Mainly, I just think it's not a very good arc for me right now because I'm more PvP focused, and the arc, as it looks like for this month at least, is all around lat mining. There's a new Devore and all that fun stuff. So it's good for, I think, the majority of folks, because lat for you guys, I mean, is important and all that, and all that stuff, and you can find lots of uses for it. For whales, though, to be honest, we're sitting on mountains and mountains of lat anyway, and we can't really use it all, and we can't use it to exchange for things that we need, so like uncommon mats or uncommon ship components. So basically, I think this month for us is really going to be more around station building and maybe ship building and things like that. So but anyway, on to the topic of today's video. Today's video is really going to be about critical hit and hull breach crewing. Throughout the past few videos, I've noticed, the kind of the power, I guess, of having hull breach and critical hit go hand in hand. Because if you remember from the weapon damage calculations, the hull breach modifier is 1.5 times the total critical hit damage bonus. So this is significant, even more so when you're looking at larger ships. So on the G4 Plus ships that hit, quite a few times per round, and they hit much harder compared to your G3 ships. This multiplier and the stacking from the critical hit damage bonus can allow you to do significantly more damage. So here I just kind of want to look at some of the officers that kind of help with hull breach and critical hit. And then we'll look at kind of how this enacts in a few battle logs. I've got Gorkon pulled up here. So Gorkon's a really good officer. His captain ability is actually not bad. Before we had HE Wharf in the picture, this was actually really good. 10% is really good, because that's in addition to your whatever your base critical hit damage is, or critical hit chance is. So that's not bad. But really, we're looking at his officer ability, which is to proc hull breach on critical hit. He actually has one of the highest percentage chances of proccing hull breach, and this is very good. But keep in mind, his issue right now is that it's based off of when you actually hit when you actually hit critically, that he has this percent chance to proc hull breach. Now, with HG Wharf in the picture, it's not really that much of an issue these days, but still, he's not going to proc at the beginning of a round because you haven't fired yet, right? So because of that, there is some issues with him proccing and you not having the full benefit of hull breach on your all of your weapon fires for that round. So sometimes you can get a pretty unlucky proc, and then you miss out on, let's say 3 weapon fires from a single weapon for some of the G4 ships. So that's kind of his issue. But again, the benefit is that once he gets max, you have a pretty high consistent chance of proccing hull breach. With that, let's look at the second officer, Kane. I'm going to pull up Kane. So Kane here, it's really his captain ability that procs hull breach. Again, it's a very high chance. It's 80% chance. If you have synergy with, let's say, Krell, then you can raise that to 90% chance. 80% chance is pretty high, and it's good because it's a captain ability, so it doesn't really change by tiers. So even if you only have a tier 1 or tier 2 Kane, you still can get this consistent 80% chance of proccing hull breach at the beginning of the battle. But again, that is kind of the issue with Kane as well, because it's really at the start of the battle that he has a chance to proc, and if you kind of have bad luck and he doesn't proc, then you won't have any hull breach for the entire battle with Kane. So that was kind of his issue. And the other thing is that it only lasts for about 3 rounds. So if you have a longer fight, then by round 4 the hull breach is gone, and you're not going to do the additional damage from those critical hits. So the last officer we're going to look at now is Lorca. Let's pull up Lorca. But here's Lorca. Lorca is a really good, really good. It's probably one of the best PvP officers out there as well. The only issue is that he's pretty hard to get and tier up and all that fun stuff. So, his captain ability is kind of middling. As we looked at in the weapon damage calculator, 100% total weapon damage is really not actually that significant. Given all the research and all that stuff. So, this is kind of a middling, nice to have type ability. But really, his officer ability is a really, really good one, because he's got a base percent chance. Let's say even at tier 1, it's 50% chance of dealing hull breach to the opponent for 2 rounds, and it procs at the beginning of each round. So at every single round, it procs, and once you tier him up a little bit, you basically have forever hull breach. So you can have hull breach throughout the entire battle. And this really helps when we're talking about using Lorca in these critical hit builds, because again, remember, the hull breach multiplier is 1.5 on top of your total critical hit damage bonus. So it allows you to deal significant more. Let's look at some of the battle logs from my testing today. And a big shout out to Jet from Anti for doing all the testing with me. We did quite a few. And actually, before we look at the battle logs, you'll note that I'm using my Kelvin kind of to do the testing. One, I just kind of wanted to use a lower power ship because I've got some research advantages over Jet. And in addition to that, I think using a lower power ship to hit up, I have a lot more content to really show, because if I used a larger ship like the Pylum or the Coronar, I would probably kill Jet's Newton a little bit too quick to really show what some of these crews can really do. So it allows just basically for more variation on that. And a quick note on this as well, when you're looking at all this stuff, it's not really for you to say, can I kind of copy and get the exact same results? Because you might not, because of the research differences. What you should do is really take a look at this and say, for my level, if I'm gonna be using like a Kelvin or even a Pylum against an enemy battleship, then what's the type of crew that's really gonna do the best job? And I think that's gonna apply, because for all of these, we did multiple tests with the same crews. So we did 2 tests per crew, and then Jet never really changed his crew once he set it here. So from an apple to apple type of standpoint, in types of crewing, for me at least, in types of crewing that I have, it's apple to apple, and you can take that application and apply it to basically either your Kelvin or your Pylum or your Hegatha or whatever type of interceptors that you have. And I think it's applicable in terms of crewing and what the best choices for crewing would be with a critical hit / hull breach crew against enemy battleships, basically. So anyway, back to the battle log. You see I've got HV Wharf Captain. So when he's captain, in addition to having the officer ability proc of increased critical hit chance, he also has a small increase to armor piercing every time you hit, and it's based off of your crew's attack, and it's 30% when he's captain like this without any type of synergy. Again, I've got Charvonic for the armor piercing that I do against Jet's battleship, and I've got Gorkon to kind of proc hull breach when I hit critically. So here, Jet, he's got Kang as captain. Kang, again, helps proc hull breach, but more importantly, he kind of counters my main mitigation stat of dodge when he's on the with his officer ability. So, and then he's got HV War for critical hits, and then he has Bael here, which unfortunately is only tier 1, so she only does a little bit of mitigation to counter my Charvonic. So here, right off the bat, you see I don't do too well. I basically get through his shields. He's got a little bit of shields left, but a big chunk of his hull is still there. So I only did like 2 or 3 million damage to his hull. And we'll look at the battle log real quick right now. Okay, so right off the bat, you see the officers are procking, and you see that Jet's Kang does proc, so he does have hull breach, so he can do increased damage to me right off the bat. And this is the nice thing about Kang. He procs at the beginning of the round, or he doesn't proc at all. So. Here you can see he's doing significant amounts of critical hit damage, 1.97 to 2.07 million, 2.1 million. Because I don't have hull breach on right now, my Kelvin's only doing 842,000 in terms of critical hits. Oh, and the other thing we should calculate is basically the mitigation percent. You see right here, because I have Charvonic, his Newton is only mitigating about 26.7% right now. And we'll look at this value again down in the towards the end of the battle, just to see where I ended up with that, because of the procs from Worf with every critical hit that I get. Also right here in round 1, this is the end of round 1, you see that my Gorkon started to proc. So with this I have hull breach, and starting round 2 I should do more damage. Alright, so right here you'll notice that I'm in round 2 and my damage went up from 842,000 to 1.29 million, 1.16 million. So it's significantly more than what I was doing before. Let's continue on. Alright, actually, so with this 1.16 million critical hit, that was actually my last hit before I blew up. So at this point, if we calculate the mitigation value with Worf, you see that it's actually very minimal. Jet at the beginning of the fight was at 26.7. Here he's down to 26.6. So in this case, having Worf captain is not very necessary because I already have Charvonic on the bridge. So with Charvonic dealing that 1600% to armor pierce, basically Worf is it becomes secondary. So when you have like a primary attack officer like Charvonic on that, like in this case, I guess against Battleships, against Charvonic, you don't really have to have Worf captain. Alright, so here we have the exact same crew from me, and then this is just a second test and second run on it. We won't go into details on the battle log here, but basically you can see I did about the same. In fact, I actually did a little bit worse, and that's just kind of, the RNG gods playing with me right now. Alright, so this is a second set of tests that I did, and note, I just kind of used Lorca as captain right here instead of Gorkon, and that's basically one of the only changes. So Lorca, when captain, he does, again, negative 100% to weapon damage from the opponent, so that helps me a little bit, and as we talked about before, he does consistent critical hits. Basically, mine is a tier 4 Lorca, so I get 75% chance to proc, so I've got a pretty good chance that he's going to proc every round or every other round, so I can have, just basically forever critical hit. And he does so at the beginning of each round, so I can benefit from that in round 1, whereas before with Gorkon, I could not. So here are the battle logs, and this is round 1, and you can see, Jets came procced, and you can see right there. And you can see right here that my Lorca actually procced right here, so that's good news for me. And you can see also right off the bat that Jet's critical hit damages are a bit less because I've got Lorca captain. So whereas before he was at 2 million, 2.1 million, he's down to 1.85 million, 1.993 million. So Lorca as captain definitely does help a little bit. And you can also see right here that my critical hit damage in round 1 went up. So whereas before I was at 842,000, I'm at 1.23 million now. So here I've got, round 2, I'm doing pretty consistent critical hits. The only problem is that Jet has had a lot more critical hits, and this is kind of why I died really fast. I actually did worse than my Gorkon video from before. So, this is kind of why we run tests 2 times. So let's look at the second battle log real quick. Alright, so again, the exact same crews, and this is the second test run, and you see that, I actually did way better than the first time. In fact, I got through basically, over 2/3 of Jet's hull. So we'll look at the battle log real quick and just kind of see how the RNG gods favored me this time as opposed to not favoring me last time. Right off the bat, you see all the officers are proccing, his Kang and my Lorca. So you see my Lorca right here is proccing. Again, he does less critical hit damage because of Lorca captain, and then he doesn't proc on a lot of his critical hits, whereas I'm proccing on most of my critical hits, which is nice. And this is kind of why I lasted into, I think, round 4 in this fight. Yeah, you see I only lost my shields at round 3, whereas before I was losing my shields at round 2. So here, I get all my hits off before I die, and that's kind of, that's kind of the firing pattern for the Kelvin, and it's also why I was able to, do much better in this fight. All right, in this one, I kind of swapped out Lorca for Kang, so Kang has to be captain for Hull Breach to proc. I was staring to see if I had an off attack officer in addition to a main attack officer, if I would do any better. So from this test result, he's basically doing the same as when I had Gorkon on. So we'll look at the logs real quick on that. So right off the bat, you see that I do get my Kang proc, so I do have Hull Breach. I'm going to start doing increased critical hit damage right off the bat. And you don't see it in this video, I think, because my Kang procced first, but, Jet's Kang procced as well. That's the reason why he can still do, 2 million, 1.93 million critical hits. And you can see right here that, with Kang proccing, I'm doing significant damage, 1.36, 1.21 million, and then his mitigation, Jet's mitigation is not very high because I've got Charvonic and his bail is pretty low level. So I'm doing the damage, but the problem is I can't really survive that long because I don't have the mitigation either, and the Newton's hitting harder and earlier than my Kelvin, so I'm gonna die pretty quick on this. So this is the second test. I'm not going to go into the Battlelog because it's basically the same story. I did a little bit more. I did a little bit better because I got through his shields, but his hull health is still at 11 million. So basically, this is a conclusion that, you know, Kang, as in terms of having a second type of attack officer, really doesn't help that much. All right, so I wanted to show this one real quick. I've got my Martok on the Calvin. My Martok's max, so he has 1400%. So it basically is countering almost completely what Kang can do. So he's knocking a max Kane back down to a tier 2 Kane. And you can see right off the bat, even without a hull breach in this case, I did significantly better than I did in the previous round. So I got through all of his shields and almost all of his hull. So let's take a look at the Battlelog real quick here. So right off the bat, you see that it actually lasts for 6 rounds, so it's a pretty long fight. I don't have any type of hull breach officers, so I'm not going to be doing as much damage, but I have more survivability because of Martok. You see Jet's Kane has procced, so he's going to be doing significant damage right off the bat. So right here we see Jet's doing significant amounts of critical hit damage, 2 million. I'm at 800-something thousand because I don't have any type of hull breach. And, you know, basically the only saving grace that we get from this is that I'm doing decent. I'm at like over 58% mitigation, thanks mostly to my Martok. So I'm able to survive for longer rounds. Yet, I guess in the end, it's really not enough to outlast the Newton. I don't have enough hull health, and my damage, while good, is not nearly as high as what the Newton can output. So here is basically the same crew. This is the second run. You can see I actually did a little bit better. So I dropped his hull health went from, you know, what he had 3 million left over, now down to 2 million left over. We won't really go through the Battlelog because it's basically the same story, but just showing you that, you know, this type of setup, even without hull breach, actually is a pretty good setup. So is there a way for me to kind of include hull breach and still have my mitigation and do even better? We'll look at that right now. All right, so this is the final series of tests, and you can see right here, I got really close, and he only had 270,000 hull damage left, and this is basically kind of RNG God territory. So I'd say I have a pretty good chance of winning this fight if we reran it. So the only thing I kind of changed was that I swapped out Charvonic for Lorca, and keep in mind I can kind of do this specifically, well, only effectively with this Interceptor versus Battleship type role, because remember, when Worf is captain, he has the increased armor piercing, and especially since I've got Martok here, he's in the same group as Worf, so he gives synergy. So whereas Worf base is only 30%, and he gets 10% synergy from Martok, so he's now at, you know, 40% armor pierce based on off of crew's attack. And I think it's basically cumulative. So this is a very, very good build to substitute Charvonic for Lorca, so I can do more hull breach damage. And you can see that the result is definitely a little bit better than where we were at before, where we had Charvonic as opposed to having you know, Lorca there. And we can look at the Battlelog real quick. So again, you see it's a longer round. It's 6 rounds, same as last time. And, you know, right off the bat, you can see my officer procking, and then, you know, Jet's Kane has procced. Right here, you see Lorca procking hull breach. So you can see I'm about to do significant more damage. So again, back to the 1.3 million type range for me. And that's kind of the reason why I managed to get so close to killing Jet. And the other thing to note is that if you look at the mitigation, so mitigation for Jet right off the bat is up in the 58% range because I don't have Charvonic, and, you know, HE Warp hasn't procced yet. So let's take a look at what his mitigation is towards the end of the fight. All right, so this is at the end of the fight. This is where I get destroyed, and right here, let's look at this number right here. This is my last shot before I got killed, and you can see from this number right here that I've lowered Jet's mitigation significantly with HE Worf captain. So his mitigation is now in the 36-37% range. And in this case, so HE Worf in this case against Battleships specifically is actually a good choice, instead of having Charvonic on the bridge, to have HE Worf captain and then have Lorca on the side to deal with the consistent hull breach, so you can maximize your damage. All right, so this is the last fight that we had, and you can see I didn't change my crews, and thank thanks to the RNG gods, basically I won. I'm not going to go through all the Battlelog here because it's a lot of the same story as before. But again, this kind of crew really works well against battleships because one, I have max damage from critical hits and hull breach, consistent hull breach. And two, I'm lowering mitigation with H.G. Worf's captain ability, so I don't really need Charbonic on the bridge. And then three, I've got Martok, which really increases my mitigation and directly counters his cane. So in this type of scenario, this is a very ideal type of scenario, and it's a type of crew for anybody, I think, with an interceptor to think about. So anything like a D4, a Kelvin, a Pylum, a Hegatha, or Northcut, anything, this type of crew would work really well when you're going specifically against, battleships. And it may or may not work well as a type of new generic type of crew. I haven't really tested those yet against non-battleships, so maybe we can look at that, or maybe you could test and kind of send me some screenshots to let me know how they work against other ship types as well. And with that, I think that's the end of the video for today. We looked at a few different setups. I think overall, we'll see, just maximize damage in and of itself will not allow you to win consistently if you're trying to hit up. If you maximize damage and you use some of the new mitigation officer, so it's kind of always the damage versus mitigation equation, and in this case it actually really worked really well, so it kind of allows you to hit up. And I think you can look at, if you have Martok, which I hope you do, you can look at a crew setup like this to kind of help you against one, enemy battleships, and two, against any other ship types as a kind of generic type of crew for you to use. And this really brings up some more interesting questions. So with the power of these new mitigation officers, how do we counter them? I don't know the answer to that right now. I'm still doing some thinking on it, and hopefully we'll have some future videos in where I can kind of look at potentially countering these new mitigation officers in some way, shape, or form. And with that, again, thank you guys for tuning in. If you're not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. And if you have any other comments, please feel free to leave them below. Thank you. Bye-bye.